Hello everyone, and welcome to the very first Paletteful Packs unboxing for the Young Artist box. I am so excited to be opening this box with you today and teaching you some awesome techniques on how to use new art supplies. Let's just jump right on in. First, let's move our fun festive paper. So the very first thing you guys are going to see in this box is some golden heavy body acrylic paint. We've got a red, yellow, green, blue, and white. We've also got a paintbrush here and a palette knife. We are going to use these to actually apply paint to our canvas, and yes, that means we are going to paint with a palette knife today. And of course, if we have paints, we need something to paint on, so we have got 3 different size canvases in here too. As always, we have our information here, so if you want to learn a little bit more about the supplies, go and check this out. Something that I did notice that I thought was really fun to tell you guys is that these are professional quality art supplies. So whether you've used acrylics before or if this is your first time, these paints are going to be a great quality for you guys to learn with. Also, don't worry because I can't pronounce the name of these colors either. Benzimidazolone. Yeah. There's also some useful tips and tricks on the back here, and I am going to go over these with you today. We are going to go over some traditional painting techniques, some dry brush techniques, and also some wash techniques. If that sounds like a lot, don't worry, I'm going to break it down step by step for you guys. We've also got our prompt list here at the bottom. We have got library, everyday object, storm, and texture. My goal today is to help you become more comfortable with these art supplies so that you can take them and then use them yourself to create your own amazing, unique pieces of art. Okay, so let's start working on our first art piece. For this, you're going to need a canvas, your paintbrush, your paints, a cup of clean water, a paper towel, and a paint palette. For your palette, you can use something like a piece of paper, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you my favorite little trick. So we have this canvas, right? And it's covered in plastic. What we're going to do is we are going to use this as our paint palette, and we are going to mix the colors on this canvas. Now, the very important part is you want to keep the plastic on it. That way, the paint will not go onto the canvas underneath, and when you're ready to use this canvas to paint on, you can just peel off the plastic and use the canvas. Just be sure to remember, do not remove the plastic. Now, the very first thing I want to teach you guys is how to mix every single color of the rainbow. I know it looks like we don't have a lot of colors here, but trust me, all we need are these colors to create any kind of color you want. To practice this, and because it's the holidays, I thought we could paint some ornaments. So I'm going to start by just drawing some circles over our canvas. Don't worry if your ornaments aren't the same size or if you can't draw a perfect circle. We're not going for perfection here. Imperfections in a painting adds personality. And if you don't like how a certain one turned out, you can always erase it and try again. We're going to cover this up in paint anyway, so feel free to be as messy as you want. If you want, you can even add little rectangles on the top to make them look more like ornaments. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start really easy. We're going to take our red paint, we're going to uncap it, and we're going to squirt a little out onto our palette. You don't need a lot of paint. Trust me, a little paint goes a long way. Plus, once the paint is dry on the canvas or on the palette, it is dry forever. So try not to squirt out a whole bunch of paint because you might end up wasting it. And you can always put more paint onto your canvas, but you cannot take paint off of it. Next, we're going to take our paintbrush. We're going to dip it in the water just a little bit. We're going to dab it onto the paper towel so it's not soaking wet. And we're going to scoop up some paint with our paintbrush. And we are going to apply it directly on the canvas. You can always go back and grab more if you need to. And you will see how easily the paint goes onto the canvas. This is because we're using a really nice quality paint. And there we go, we have our first ornament. Now we're going to take our same paintbrush, clean it off by dipping it in the water. Make sure to get all the paint off. and then dry it off on the towel. You may need to do this a few times to make sure all the paint is off. Now we are going to mix our first color, which is orange. Orange is also my favorite color. So we're going to take our yellow, and we're going to put a little bit onto our canvas right here. And we are also going to take a little bit of white and put that on the palette too. Now here is where the knife comes in. I know you guys are waiting for it. We're going to scoop up the paint with our knife. We're going to take some red, some yellow, and some white. And we're going to take our knife and we're going to mix them together. We're going to do this by scraping the paint and picking it back up and scraping it again until it's nice and mixed. And as you can see, we have orange now. Try to make the red and yellow paints equal in the mixture, but if it looks a little bit too yellow or a little too red, you can always take more of one kind of paint and add it into the mix. You then want to wipe off your palette knife. You don't want the paint to dry on it. So by dip it in the water, and then you can just wipe it clean off on your paper towel, because we will be using this knife again and we want it to be clean when we mix our next color. Then you can take your paintbrush, dip it in the beautiful orange that you just mixed, and paint your second ornament. You might be wondering why I added white, and that is because adding white can make the color lighter or brighter. I like things to look kind of pastel, so I decided to add white. You don't have to do this if you want a more dramatic orange color. This is definitely down to artist preference. The most important thing about trying these art supplies is to try them and experiment. And if you want to try something that I maybe haven't talked about in this video, I encourage you to try it yourself and see how it works for you. We're then going to clean off our paintbrush again. And you can see I used pretty much all of my yellow color. So what I'm going to do is just take our yellow again and put a little bit more paint onto our palette. And I'm going to pick it up with my paintbrush again, just like I did with the red, and apply it to our canvas. And now we have a yellow ornament. I also want to encourage you guys not to leave your paintbrush in the water. I used to do this all the time when I first started painting, and it actually harms your paintbrushes. If you put your paint in the water, it bends the bristles, and if they stay there for a while, they'll bend that way permanently. You don't want that. So always make sure to clean off your brush, dry it off, and if you're not going to be using that same brush, just lay it to the side. So we do have this lovely green color here, which you can use to paint our green ornament if you'd like, but I also want to show you how to mix green with blue and yellow. We have yellow on our canvas. I'm going to take some blue, boop, and I'm again going to take our fun palette knife. I'm going to scoop up some yellow, place it down, scoop up some blue, place it down, and mix. And we have green. If you want the color to be a little bit brighter, go ahead and take some white and add that to the mix. Wipe off your palette knife, take your paintbrush, and paint in our green ornament. We can now take our blue that we've already got and do the same thing that we did with the red and the yellow. That is one powerful blue, isn't it? Wow! Again, clean off your paintbrush, boop boop, because now we're going to mix our final color, which is purple. Again, if you need to, feel free to put more paint onto your palette. Sometimes you'll notice that your paint will get contaminated too as you mix. That's okay, it's all part of the process. can see here that my white has some green and some red in it, and I don't want those colors to interfere with my purple color, so I'm just going to put out more white over here so that our color is nice and clean. Now, if you don't want to use the palette knife to mix, you absolutely don't have to, so for this one we're going to mix just with our paintbrush. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to scoop up a color, which is red, scoop up some blue, place it right next to it, and then just mix with your paintbrush. And again, this color looks super dark, so what I'm going to do is take our we're going to take our white and just add it to the mix. There we go, that's a little bit more like it. Make sure that your paint is all the way mixed, and then you can just take that and apply it to your canvas. And there we have some Christmas ornaments. Now, we still have a lot of paint left over, so I want to encourage you to take this moment and decorate your ornaments. I want to add orange polka dots to my yellow ornament, so what I'm going to do is take my paintbrush and I'm actually going to dip this end into my paint. Once you have that, you can just poke the canvas, and now we have perfect little dots. Yay! With art, there's no right or wrong way to use an art supply. So if you feel like an art supply may have another use to it, you should experiment with it. Now let's add some white stripes to our red ornament. The cool thing about acrylic paint is that you can paint over your layers and cover up anything that you don't want underneath. So as you can see, the more I put this white paint over my ornament, the more it covers up the red color that's underneath. Feel free to really experiment here and try whatever you want to do to decorate these ornaments. If you want, you can also paint these little rectangles up here too. Now you can leave your painting like this if you would like, or if you feel it's missing just a little something, we can color in the background. Now, something to keep in mind is that we have a lot of bright colors going on right here. If you added another bright color in the background, the thing might look a little bit too much. It would be just too much going on. What we want is a nice contrast. So what we're going to do is we are going to mix a very, very light pastel color so that these bright ornaments will pop out against it. We are going to squeeze out a little bit more white than we have been because we have a bigger area to color. I'm also going to squeeze out a little bit of yellow and a tiny bit of red. We are going to take a big glob of that white and put it down, and we're going to take just a tiny amount of both the yellow and the red. We definitely want the white to be the biggest color going on here. Now you can see we have an almost white with just a tiny bit of orange color right here. This is going to be great for our ornaments to pop out against. Laying down this color will also cover up any little imperfections or any pencil lines that you may have on the canvas. So we're just going to take our color and we're going to start at one end and we're going to work our way down and across. You're going to want to start the opposite of whatever your dominant hand is. If I started down here and tried to work my way up, I would be rubbing my hand in the paint and making a huge mess. So if you are right-handed like me, start in the upper left corner. If you're left-handed, start in the upper right. And we're just going to paint, paint, paint. We're going to cover up any little pencil marks, or if you have a really wonky ornament, you can also try to cover it up and make it a bit more even. And you might need a few layers of this paint to go over certain spots. That's okay. You want to try to mix enough paint to where you can cover the whole background in one go. If you run out of paint, don't worry, that's fine. You can try to match the color as close as possible. And if the color doesn't match completely, don't worry, just cover it up. Once you finish the background, now we have finished our first little painting. Now, because I want to use this canvas for the next painting, all I have to do is peel off this plastic so I can use the canvas underneath. See? Perfectly good canvas. For our next painting, I want to try something a bit more advanced. We are going to try blending colors on the canvas together. We are only going to be using the blue and white paint for this piece, and what we are going to do is make a gradient from a very light blue to a very dark blue, and then we will add some trees. Blending is super easy to do with acrylics, but if you're lost and not quite sure how to do that, well, just walk with me and we will go through it step by step. I'm going to squeeze out more paint than what we did previously, and this is because we want to cover the entire canvas in this paint. So squeeze out a little bit more, and remember, if it's not enough, we can always go back and add more paint. With our handy dandy palette knife, I'm going to scoop up a lot of this white and just a little bit of this blue. That seems like a pretty good place to start. I'm going to squeeze out some more white, and we're going to make our medium blue color. So I'm going to use less white than before and a little bit more blue. So you can see this blue is just a little bit darker. We're going to do this again, except using much less white and much more blue. And then the final color we will put down is this straight blue from the tube. So what we're going to do is clean off our palette knife. Once it's nice and clean, we're going to scoop up this light blue paint, and we're going to apply it to our canvas with the knife. We are only going to cover this top part. And once you have that paint down, we're going to move on to our next color. And we're going to apply that to the canvas as well. When you get to this space where the two colors meet, you can start blending by just kind of mixing the paints together right on the canvas. Now, as you can see, I didn't quite have enough paint mixed to cover the whole thing. So what I'm going to do is go back to my palette and mix that same color with the white and the blue. It's okay if the color doesn't match perfectly. It's going to look messy and unblended at first, but that is why we're going to work in layers and we're going to go over it. So before you move on to anything else, let's add our next layer. And just spread it over the canvas. Make sure you get into those corners. And then on the very bottom, we're going to take this straight blue and just lay it down. Your hands might get a little messy during this, but that's okay. You might notice that while you put down two wet layers of paint next to each other, they might start to blend a little bit on their own. And that's good. That is kind of what you want. Acrylic paint blends really nicely with itself. The easiest way to do this, however, is if both layers are wet. Up here, you can see that the layers were a little bit too dry before I tried to blend them, so there's less of a smooth gradient between the colors. However, down here, both of the layers were really wet, so they blended a lot easier. The reason why I used a palette knife for this is because this palette knife, because it's so broad and long, it made it easy to put down a lot of color onto the canvas at once. However, I'm going to clean off my palette knife, and I'm going to switch back to the paintbrush for a moment. I want to create some smoother transitions here. So what I'm going to do is mix this same light blue color and this same mid blue color. I have paint left over here, so I can use this as a guide to what my color should look like. Now I'm going to make sure that my paintbrush is clean and just slightly damp. And I'm going to take some more of this lightest blue color and apply it onto the canvas. And then I'm going to take some of this next blue color and apply it right beside it. Now I don't want that harsh line, remember? So what I'm going to do is go back and forth over the two colors and blend them together. I might take some more of one color and apply it on top to create a smoother transition. See how much smoother that looks? That is what we're going for. Now I'm going to do the same thing, but move it down to the next layer. So I'm going to mix this darker blue color again. We're again going to lay the colors side by side onto the canvas. And we're going to blend them together by just running your paintbrush along the line. Just keep going back and forth, up and down, until the color looks nice and blended. And then we have our next layer. We're going to do the same exact thing on the bottom now. So I'm going to take this color, lay it down, and then lay the bright blue right beside it. And I'm just going to blend them together by going back and forth and up and down. What I'm doing with the paintbrush is just running it along the canvas in one line, one motion. Try to do it all in one go. Otherwise, if you do small little steps, it's not going to look quite as blended. But if you just do one swipe, the line is nice and even and clean. And now we have our beautiful sky. What we're going to do now is we are going to wait for this to dry because we want to paint some trees on top of it. But if we try to paint trees on top of it now, the colors would blend together like they just did. But acrylic paints, once they dry, they stay where they are. So we're going to have this layer dry completely so then we can paint on top of it and a new layer without it mixing with the layer underneath. Make sure to clean off your paintbrush. If you let your paintbrush dry with the acrylic paint still on it, it will ruin your paintbrush. So it's a really, really good habit to get into, to just every time you're done with your paintbrush, immediately clean it off with water. Make sure you get all the bristles, and then dry it off on a paper towel. Then, I know I'm impatient too. This is my least favorite part of making a painting, but we're going to take a step back. I'm gonna grab a snack and we will come back to this once it's dry. Now the good thing about acrylics is that they dry really, really fast, so we don't have to wait too long before we start our next layer. I've waited just about 5 minutes or so, and I've tested the canvas to make sure it is dry, and it is. So I'm going to go in and paint our trees. We are going to keep our trees super, super simple. So if you don't know how to paint a tree, don't worry. We're going to dip our paintbrush in the blue again, and we're going to pick a place to start. I'm gonna start right here, and we're just going to take our paintbrush and make little lines. We're going to make these lines, and as we go down the canvas, we are going to spread them a little bit wider. We're going to do this all the way down the canvas. If you run into the side of the canvas, that's fine, just keep going down. Now we're going to do the same thing, but going the other direction on the other side. Just keep kind of flicking your paintbrush in a diagonal movement all the way down. Keep picking up paint when your paintbrush runs out. And eventually you will reach the bottom. If there's some places in the middle where the paint didn't quite reach, just fill it in with the blue. And now we have a tree. If you want to be extra fancy, you can add little details and little branches with the side of your paintbrush. Or you can adjust the shape of it by making some branches go out a little bit further. If you feel like the paint is a little thick or a little gummy feeling, you can dip your paint brush into the water and then dry it off just a tiny bit, and then again do the same thing. We're going to make another tree here, and I'm going to make it a little shorter than the first one. Now I want this one to kind of be a little bit thicker, a little fatter, so I'm just going to make my branches kind of stick out a little bit more. Feel free to also go back and change your first one too if you don't really like it. You can go back and forth until you have trees that you like. Now we're going to clean off our paintbrush again. And I want to make some trees that look like they're in the background a little bit. So we have these really dark blue trees right here, and because they're so contrasted, they look like they're closer to you. What I want to do is have a tree kind of fade more into the background. To do that, I'm going to have this tree be less contrasted between it and the background. That's just a fancy way of saying I'm going to make it lighter in color. I'm going to try to mix this color again. As you can see, this color has pretty much dried, so I can't really use that, but I'm just going to take my paint and mix the same color again. I'm now going to take this paint, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. But I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm going to have the paint stop where this color stops. If I were to continue the color all the way down, it wouldn't look like it's fading, right? It would kind of stand out because there'd be more contrast down here. So I'm just going to have it peek out just a little bit. And And when we get to the same blue, I'm just going to stop painting. See how they look like they're in the back? That's exactly what I want. Also, be careful not to cover up the trees that you've already painted. If you do cover up the tree a little bit, for example, say if I took my paint and I went over this one, and I was like, oh no, I wanted to keep that blue, I didn't want to do that. Don't worry, because all you have to do is paint right back over it with the blue. There you go, and you can pretty much just erase any mistake you might make. Now, this blue turned out to be a little lighter than I wanted, so I still have the paint mixed here, but I'm just going to mix in a bit of the blue color to make it a little bit darker, because I want a tree that's not as light as this, but not as dark as this. I want it to be about this color right here. So I'm going to try to mix a color that matches that. There we go, that looks about right. And I'm just going to paint another little tree. It's like Bob Ross says, we're painting happy little trees. And this one is going to go down farther than this tree, but again, not all the way down. It's going to stop about here. And again, we're gonna try not to cover up this tree. And there we go. Now we have a forest full of trees. Once that's dry, painting number 2 is done. And there we have it. Thank you guys so much for watching the very first Paletteful Packs Young Artist box unboxing with me. I am so excited to start teaching you guys some awesome new techniques with your art supplies. I hope that this video kind of helped you learn how to mix colors and blend colors. Again, the best way to learn any supply is for you to try it out for yourself, get your hands dirty, literally, look how dirty my hands are, and just play with the supplies. If you have not yet gotten a Paletteful Packs box, please check out the link in the description below to check out our website where you can sign up. And if you are already part of the Paletteful family, welcome! We're so excited to have you here. If you have social media, please feel free to post all of your art onto social media that you make with Paletteful Packs and use our hashtags. We have hashtag Palettefulprompt and hashtag Paletteful Packs. That is going to be it for me today, guys. Again, thank you for watching this. This is my first time doing something like this. So if you have any suggestions for what you guys would like to see in these young adult artist videos, please let me know. Until then, that's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next month for another Young Artist box.